I'll never forget the moment I realized my peaceful home was about to turn into a battlefield. I had just wrapped up a brutal 12-hour overnight shift at the local hospital, where I work as a floor nurse. The only thing I could think about was collapsing onto my couch and getting a few precious hours of sleep. My body ached from head to toe, and the exhaustion was bone deep. But as I turned onto my quiet suburban street that morning, something made me hit the brakes, hard. A silver SUV I didn't recognize was parked right in the middle of my driveway. At first, I figured maybe it was an emergency or someone had car trouble. But there was no note, no neighbor standing nearby, no explanation. Just that SUV, sitting there like it belonged. Trying to stay calm, I parked on the street, which, in our neighborhood, is a miracle to find, and left a polite handwritten note under the wiper. "Hi, this is private property. Please don't park here again. Thanks." I headed inside, hoping it was just a mistake. My father, who's in his late 70s and has difficulty walking, was staying with me for a few days. That driveway was crucial for helping him safely get in and out of the house. That space wasn't just convenient, it was necessary. I sank onto the couch, trying to convince myself it was a one-time thing. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Hours later, groggy and still recovering from my shift, I looked out the window, and the SUV was still there. My note? Crumpled and tossed into the bushes. That's when my patience ran out. I had an appointment to take my dad to the doctor. I needed that driveway. Furious, I wrote a second note, shorter, sharper, and more direct. "This is private property. Do not park here. Final warning." I left it on the windshield, hoping the message would finally get through. But of course, life rarely plays out how you want. The very next morning, I stepped outside for a grocery run, and there it was again. That same SUV, shamelessly parked in my driveway. My final warning note, torn to shreds and scattered across the concrete like confetti. I was done being polite. My father needed access. I needed answers. The next day, I finally got my chance. While I was inspecting the SUV, trying to figure out if I could legally have it towed, someone stepped outside from the house across the street. Karen. Blonde bob, pristine white blouse, and the permanent scowl of someone who believed rules didn't apply to her, but must apply to everyone else. She was the new HOA president, and her reputation had already made the rounds. Petty violations, endless citations, harassing neighbors for yard gnomes and mailbox paint. But this was our first actual encounter. She marched right toward me, eyes locked on mine. "What are you doing near my car?" she snapped. I raised an eyebrow. "This is your SUV?" "Yes," she said, crossing her arms. "Street parking here is a nightmare, and I have important HOA duties. So I use your driveway sometimes. It's not like you're using it every second." I clenched my jaw. "You're parking on my private property, without permission. And you've ignored multiple notes. My elderly father depends on that space for safe access." She scoffed. "Look, I'm the HOA president. I know the rules. You don't own this street." She pointed at the concrete. "Besides, if it was that important, you would have brought it up earlier." She looked me right in the eye and said, "If you want me gone, you'll have to do more than scribble on scraps of paper." Then she climbed into her SUV, slammed the door, and peeled out of my driveway with a screech of tires. That was my introduction to the HOA president. My frustration quickly boiled over into full-blown anger. But for a few days, things seemed to quiet down. Karen didn't return, and for a moment, I thought maybe she'd finally gotten the message. My dad was relieved too, no more awkward exits or risky maneuvers just to get to the car. But of course, it didn't last. Less than a week later, I came home from another exhausting shift at the hospital and found her SUV back in my driveway. Only this time, she'd parked so aggressively that it blocked the accessibility ramp I'd installed for my dad's walker. If he had needed to leave in an emergency, we would have been stuck. My blood pressure spiked. I stormed across the street and pounded on Karen's front door, heart racing in my chest. The porch light flicked on, and there she was, looking like I was the one causing trouble. "You blocked my dad's ramp," I said through gritted teeth. "He can't get out of the house." She rolled her eyes, completely unfazed. "He can walk around it. Let's be honest, you're making a big deal out of nothing." I clenched my fists and counted silently to 3. "He's elderly. He uses a walker. That is not nothing. Move your car." She let out a dramatic sigh, the kind teenagers give when told to clean their rooms. "Fine. But just know as HOA president, I can make things very complicated for you if you keep harassing me." Then she slammed the door in my face. A few minutes later, she moved her SUV, but I stood there staring at the oil stains it left behind, her threat still echoing in my ears. The next morning, while my dad's nurse was visiting, we were sitting in the living room discussing his medication schedule when I heard a loud thud outside. I went to the window and there she was, Karen, messing around near my mailbox. I slipped outside, confused and on high alert. That's when I saw it, a hot pink notice taped to my mailbox with the words HOA violation printed in bold. Apparently, Karen had decided that the oil residue her SUV left behind was a hazardous substance. "You're fining me for something you caused?" I said, yanking the notice from the post. "This is insane." Karen crossed her arms and stared me down. "Watch me. As president, I can issue citations for any violation of neighborhood standards. An oily driveway definitely qualifies." "That leak came from your car," I snapped. "You're the one who—" She waved me off mid-sentence. "It's your property. You're responsible for keeping it clean. End of story. Fix it by next week or face a fine." My hand shook. My dad's nurse stepped outside to check on the commotion, and Karen turned and walked away without so much as acknowledging her presence. It was humiliating, frustrating, and more than anything, it made me realize that I needed to stop reacting and start acting. That afternoon, still rattled, I called Dan, an old friend from college who now specialized in HOA disputes and property law. I told him everything. There was a pause. And he said, "She's parking on your driveway without permission? That's trespassing. HOA president or not, if she does it again, you're completely within your rights to have her towed." I hesitated. "But she keeps saying she can fine me or cause problems." Dan chuckled. "She can't override property law. That's not how it works. And if she's threatening you, that's harassment. Keep a record, photos, notes, dates, everything. And next time she parks there, call the tow company." That call lit a fire under me. I had been more than reasonable, notes, direct conversations, even putting up with threats. But enough was enough. My father's safety was on the line. So I made a plan. A few days later, after a short grocery run, I pulled up to find her SUV glinting in my driveway again. She'd done it. Again. My dad was expecting his home health aide within the hour, and we needed that space. I didn't hesitate. My phone was already loaded with the number of the local towing company. It was go time. I snapped a few quick photos of her SUV, clearly blocking the walkway, and calmly dialed the tow company. "Yes, I've got an unauthorized vehicle on my private driveway," I said, giving the dispatcher my address. To my surprise, they arrived fast. Watching the tow truck hook up Karen's precious SUV and haul it off was therapeutic. My heart was pounding, caught somewhere between nerves and satisfaction. But I reminded myself, I was doing the right thing. She had pushed me to this point. 20 minutes later, her car was gone. I hovered near the window, half expecting Karen to storm in at any moment, but nothing happened. The rest of the day was blissfully quiet. Later that evening, boom, 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 someone pounded on my front door like they were trying to break it down. I barely managed to set my drink down before opening it. There she was. Karen. Face bright red. Phone clutched in her hand like it was a weapon. "You towed my car," she shrieked, practically shaking. I leaned against the doorframe, staying calm. "Yep. You parked in my driveway. Again. That was illegal. I had HOA paperwork in there. You can't just steal my car." "Illegal? No. You were trespassing. I warned you more than once. I'm the HOA president. I was on official business. You had no right." I let out a slow breath. "And that means you get VIP parking on my property? News flash, HOA rules don't override property laws." She opened her mouth, trying to come up with something, anything, when suddenly, her eyes lit up. She held up her phone. "Fine. I'm calling the police. You're harassing me." I shrugged. "Go for it. I'll wait." 15 tense minutes later, 2 officers pulled up. Same ones as last time. Karen rushed toward them like they were her personal rescue team. "Officers, thank God. He had my car towed again. This is theft." The taller officer, Reynolds, calmly asked, "Ma'am, slow down." "What happened?" "He took my car. There's never street parking. I was doing HOA work, and he keeps harassing me." Reynolds turned to me. "Did you have the car towed again, sir?" I nodded and showed him the photos. Karen's SUV parked squarely in my driveway. Reynolds barely glanced back at her. Ma'am, the driveway is private property. He has every right to tow unauthorized vehicles. Karen's face paled. No. That can't be right. I'm the HOA President. The second officer, Martinez, sighed. That doesn't give you the right to park wherever you want. If you want your car back, you'll need to pay the impound fee. Karen gasped. Pay? For this? That's how towing works, Reynolds said, folding his arms. She was livid, shaking with fury. This is a conspiracy. You're taking his side. Martinez narrowed his eyes. You called us over an illegal towing claim. If you make another false report, we will charge you. Karen froze. The realization hit her. She had no power here. So that's it? She spat. You're just going to let him get away with this? Don't you know who I am? I run this neighborhood. If I say someone's breaking the rules, you listen. Reynolds didn't flinch. Ma'am, the law doesn't care who you are. It's his property. It's his right. Karen's face twisted in fury. She shot me a glare so intense I almost laughed. You'll pay for this, she hissed. This isn't over. I smirked. Oh, I'm sure it's not. She stormed off. The officers gave me a knowing nod and left. For the next week, Karen avoided me entirely. No more driveway takeovers, no confrontations. I thought maybe, just maybe, that was the end of it. But I was wrong. One calm Saturday, I got up early to take Dad to a follow-up appointment. I pulled back the curtains and froze. Karen's SUV was back. And now she had backup. A second car was parked right behind it, blocking me in completely. My jaw dropped. I rushed outside, furious. Dad's appointment was in 2 hours, we didn't have time for this. The second car was a smaller sedan, probably a friend or family member's. Either way, both vehicles were on my driveway. My dad came to the door, leaning on his walker. Everything okay, son? Karen's at it again, I said, jaw clenched. 2 cars this time. He sighed. That woman has no respect. I put a hand on his shoulder. Don't worry. I've got this. I knocked on Karen's door, no answer. I called out. Asked a neighbor. No one had seen her. She was either ignoring me or not home, but either way, those cars had to go. Dan's words came back to me, it's your property. You're within your rights. So I called the tow company again. Hey, I said, it's me again. We've got 2 this time. They chuckled and said they'd send 2 trucks right away. 30 minutes later, both trucks arrived. They hooked up the SUV and the sedan. The drivers shook their heads, muttering about the audacity. I felt nervous Karen was going to explode, but I also felt relieved. This had gone on long enough. Watching both vehicles get hauled away was almost surreal. The tension in my chest lifted. 2 hours later, right on cue, a car screeched to a halt outside. Karen practically sprinted up my driveway. Where's my car? She screamed. Both of your cars were towed, I said, calm but firm. This is private property. I'm done playing nice. You monster. I'm calling the police again. And she did, babbling into her phone about being targeted. When the officers arrived, it was the same pair. He had my cars towed. Again. She shouted. This has to be illegal. Officer Reynolds turned to me. Got the photos? I nodded, showing my phone. The cars. My driveway. Timestamped. Reynolds faced Karen. Ma'am, this is exactly what we discussed last time. He has every right to do this. Karen started shrieking, ranting about how I was ruining her life and threatening HOA fines. The officers just nodded politely, taking notes and trying to wrap things up. She finally realized her cars were at the impound lot again. She'd have to pay double the fees. The rage on her face was indescribable. You've made an enemy, she seethed, stepping closer. You'll regret this. I stayed silent. She stormed off, shoulders trembling, fists clenched. I watched her disappear down the sidewalk. My father placed a hand on my shoulder as I stepped back inside. She's intense, he muttered. I nodded, exhaling deeply. My heart was still pounding, but this time, I didn't feel powerless. Karen had declared war, but now the law was on my side.